I still remember the day I got the keys to my house on River Street in Savannah, Georgia. It was 1985, and I was standing there, 35 years old, clutching those keys like they were the answer to every prayer I'd whispered in the dark. My daughter, Emiliami, as she liked to be called, was just 10, her eyes wide with wonder as she ran through the front door. "Mama, is this really ours?" she asked, her little hands trailing along the oak banister. I knelt down, looked into her bright face, and said, "Yes, sweetheart, it's ours, just you and me." That moment felt like a victory. A single mother, a schoolteacher, owning a home of her own. It was my sanctuary. Until it wasn't. My name is Charlotte Bennett, but everyone calls me Lottie. I'm 68 now, and I've spent most of my life teaching second graders how to read, write, and dream big. It wasn't a glamorous job, but it was honest work, the kind that fills your heart, even if it doesn't always fill your wallet. Back then, after my husband left me run off with a cocktail waitress and every cent we had in our joint account, I swore I'd never depend on anyone again. I rebuilt my life, penny by penny, teaching by day and studying investment books by night. I bought my first rental property at 40, then another, and another. Over 30 years, I built a small fortune, but I kept it quiet. Not even Amy knew. After what I'd been through, I wanted my security to be mine alone. That house on River Street was my pride and joy. It wasn't a mansion, just a 2-story colonial with creaky floors, a wraparound porch, and a garden full of carnations that bloomed like bursts of pink and white every spring. I'd spend my weekends tending to those flowers, sipping sweet tea with neighbors, or reading in my cozy nook by the window. Sometimes, I'd tutor kids from the neighborhood, watching their faces light up when they sounded out a new word. Those were good years, quiet years, filled with small joys. I thought Amy felt the same way about our home. I thought she'd always see it as ours. But 33 years later, my own daughter, the little girl who once held my hand and called me her hero, turned against me. She and her husband, Ryan, betrayed me in a way I never saw coming. They looked at me 68 years old, gray hair, simple clothes, and decided I was nothing but a burden. They wanted my house, my sanctuary, and they were willing to push me out to get it. It hurts to say this, but Amy's words still echo in my head. I overheard her one evening, talking to Ryan in the kitchen while I was out in the garden. I'd been pruning my carnations, the air warm with the scent of summer, when her voice drifted through the open window. "Mama's just a retired teacher," she said, her tone sharp, dismissive. "She's got nothing but this house. No savings, no plan. We can't let her drag us down with her." I froze, my pruning shears trembling in my hand. Dragged them down. Me, the woman who'd raised her alone, paid for her college, and given her everything I had. I stood there, heart pounding, as Ryan's voice chimed in, low and calculating. "This place is worth a fortune, Amy. We just need to figure out how to make it ours." I don't know how long I stood there, staring at my carnations, their petals blurring through my tears. I'd always thought family was about love, about standing by each other no matter what. But in that moment, I realized Amy didn't see me as her mother anymore. To her, I was just an old woman, clinging to a house she thought she deserved more than I did. I wanted to march inside, to confront them, but something held me back. Maybe it was the weight of all those years I'd spent protecting her, loving her, or maybe it was the realization that I'd been hiding a part of myself for too long, my strength, my independence, my wealth. You see, I wasn't the poor, helpless widow they thought I was. I'd spent decades building something they couldn't even imagine. Those rental properties, those careful investments, had grown into a nest egg that could buy me a life most people only dream of, but I never flaunted it. I wore the same modest dresses, drove the same old Buick, and lived in that same old house, because it was enough for me. I didn't need luxury to be happy, just my garden, my books, and the memories of raising Amy. But that night, hearing my daughter's words, I knew things had to change. I couldn't stay in a place where I was no longer wanted. I couldn't let them take the one thing I'd worked so hard for. So, I made a choice. Not out of anger, but out of a quiet, burning resolve. I wasn't going to let Amy and Ryan define me. I wasn't going to be the poor old mama they saw. I was going to take back my life, my way. And when the time came, I'd show them just how wrong they were about me. It started with little things, the kind you barely notice until they pile up and suffocate you. When Amy and Ryan first moved into my house on River Street, I was happy. truly happy. My daughter, now grown, was back under my roof, and I thought it would bring us closer. They said it was temporary, just until they saved enough to buy their own place. Ryan was a real estate agent, always talking about hot markets and prime locations, and well, she'd always been my dreamer, but now she hung on his every word. I opened my home to them, thinking it was what families do. I didn't know I was opening the door to losing it all. At first, it felt like a new chapter. Ryan would tinker around the house, fixing a squeaky door or patching a leak in the guest bathroom. Amy would cook dinner sometimes, simple things like spaghetti or grilled chicken, and we'd sit together in the evenings, chatting about their day. It wasn't perfect, but it was nice. I'd watch them laugh over some inside joke, and even if I didn't always understand it, I felt grateful to have them close. My house was big enough for all of us 3 bedrooms, a sunny porch, my carnation garden out back. I thought we could share it, make it work. But then, slowly, so slowly, I barely saw it coming. Things began to change. It started with the garden. My carnations, those bursts of pink and white I'd spent years nurturing, were my pride. I'd won a local gardening award for them once, and every spring, neighbors would stop by to admire them. One Saturday, I came home from the grocery store to find Ryan out back with a shovel, tearing up my flower beds. "What are you doing?" I asked, my voice sharper than I meant it to be. He looked up, wiping sweat from his brow, and grinned like he was doing me a favor. "Modernizing, Lottie. This garden's a bit old-fashioned. I'm putting in a BBQ pit, something sleek, something we can actually use." I stood there, stunned, as he ripped out my flowers, roots and all, tossing them into a pile like they were weeds. Amy came out, saw my face, and just shrugged. "It'll look great, Mama. More space for entertaining." "Entertaining who?" I wanted to ask, but I didn't. I bit my tongue, because that's what you do when you love someone. You let things slide, but it didn't stop there. My books, the ones I'd collected over decades, dog-eared novels, poetry anthologies, teaching guides, started disappearing from the living room shelves. I found them one day, stacked in dusty boxes in the garage, replaced by Ryan's real estate magazines and Amy's collection of crystal candles. "It's just more modern, Mama," Amy said when I asked. Modern. That word started to feel like a slap every time I heard it. My paintings, little watercolors I'd done years ago, came down from the walls to make room for abstract prints Ryan picked out. My cozy reading nook by the window, where I'd spent countless evenings with a cup of tea, became their home office. They didn't even ask. Then came the day they asked me to move out of my bedroom. It was upstairs, the biggest room in the house, with a view of the river that always calmed my soul. Ryan sat me down one Sunday morning, his voice dripping with fake concern. "Lottie, those stairs are tough on you, aren't they? At your age, it's not safe. Why don't you take the guest room downstairs? It's cozier, easier to get around." My knees were fine, my health was fine. I'd just had a checkup that said so, but I looked at Amy, hoping she'd say something, anything, to defend me. She just nodded. "It's for your own good, Mama." So I moved downstairs, to a cramped room that used to be a storage closet, while they took over my bedroom, my sanctuary. I felt like a guest in my own home, tiptoeing around to avoid disturbing them. The rules came next, unspoken but heavy. No cooking after 7 p.m., because it messed up their routine. No inviting friends over without checking with them first, because the house needs to stay presentable. No playing my favorite jazz records in the evening, because Ryan said they were too loud. I started to feel like I was shrinking, like my life was being packed away into those same boxers in the garage. But the worst came one afternoon when I came home early from a tutoring session. I found Ryan in my room, standing at my desk, rifling through my personal papers. Not just any papers, my financial documents, the ones I kept locked in a small safe under the desk. He froze when he saw me, then flashed that slick smile of his. "Oh, Lottie, just looking for some old photos for Amy. Thought you might have them in here." "Photos in my safe? I wasn't born yesterday." I kept my voice steady, though my heart was racing. "Those are private, Ryan. You know that." He laughed it off, but his eyes were sharp, calculating. Later that evening, Amy pulled me aside, her voice tinged with irritation. "Mama, why are you so secretive? We're family. You don't need to lock things away from us." I wanted to laugh, to cry, to scream. Family, is that what we were? Because it didn't feel like it anymore. I started locking my door every time I left the house, and I could tell it drove Ryan crazy. He'd mutter things under his breath, things like, "What's she hiding?" As if I was the one with something to prove. Looking back, I should have seen it coming. The way Ryan would talk about property values, eyeing my house like it was a prize. The way Amy stopped asking about my day, my life, my dreams. She used to be my little girl, the one who'd curl up next to me while I read her bedtime stories. Now, she looked at me like I was a problem to be solved, an obstacle in their perfect life. I kept telling myself it was temporary, that they'd move out once they saved enough. But deep down, I knew they weren't saving for their own place. They wanted mine, and they were willing to push me out to get it. I tried to hold on to the love I had for Amy, to the memories of her childhood laughter, her tiny hand in mine. But every day, that love felt heavier, like a weight pulling me under. I wasn't just losing my home, I was losing my daughter, and the worst part, I was starting to realize she didn't care. I've always believed that family is supposed to be your safe harbor, the place you turn to when the world gets rough. For years, I poured everything into being that harbor for Amy, my time, my love, my home. But somewhere along the way, I became the one who needed saving. And instead of lifting me up, my own daughter and her husband were ready to cast me out, like an old piece of furniture they didn't want anymore. It wasn't just the little slights piling up, the uprooted carnations, the boxed up books, the rules that made me feel like a stranger in my own house. It was the moment I realized they were plotting to take it all from me. That was the moment everything changed. It happened one quiet spring evening, the kind where the air smells like jasmine and the river outside my window glimmers under the setting sun. I was in my garden, what was left of it, trying to salvage a few carnations Ryan hadn't torn out for his precious BBQ pit. I could hear voices through the kitchen window, low and secretive. At first, I thought it was just Amy and Ryan planning their weekend. But then I caught my name. "Lottie's not getting any younger," Ryan said, his voice smooth and cold, like he was discussing a business deal. "This house is worth at least $1 million, Amy. Once she's gone, it's ours. We could sell it, buy something in the city, really start living." My heart stopped. Gone. Did he mean dead? I leaned closer, holding my breath, praying I'd misheard. Amy's voice came next, softer but just as cutting. "She's a burden, Ryan. She can't live here alone forever. A nursing home would be better for her. Safer. Safer." I was 68, not 90. My doctor had just told me my heart was strong, my blood pressure perfect. But to them, I was already half in the grave, an obstacle to their big plans. Ryan chuckled, a sound that made my skin crawl. "Exactly. We'll get her settled somewhere nice, and this place will be ours. I've already got a guy who can appraise it next week." I stood there, frozen in the twilight, my hands trembling around the gardening shears. They weren't just talking about my house, they were talking about my life, as if I were a problem to be solved, a loose end to be tied up. I don't know how I made it through the next few days. I moved through the house like a ghost, cooking my meals quietly, keeping my door locked, avoiding their eyes. Every time Amy smiled at me, it felt like a lie. Every time Ryan called me Lottie with that fake warmth, I wanted to scream. I kept replaying their words in my head, each one a knife twisting deeper, a burden, a nursing home. They thought I was nothing, that I had nothing. They didn't know about the rental properties I'd bought, the investments I'd nurtured for decades. They didn't know I was worth more than they could ever dream. And maybe that was my mistake, keeping it all a secret, thinking modesty was strength. But it wasn't modesty anymore. It was survival. The final straw came at dinner a week later. I'd made roast chicken, the kind Amy used to love when she was little. We sat around the table, the tension thick enough to choke on. Ryan was scrolling through his phone, probably looking at real estate listings, while Amy picked at her food. I tried to make small talk, asking about their day, but they barely answered. Then Ryan set his phone down, leaned back in his chair, and looked at me with that salesman's smile. "Lottie, we've been thinking," he said, his voice too smooth, too practiced. "This house is a lot for you to handle. The upkeep, the bills, it's too much for someone your age. Have you ever thought about a nursing home? Somewhere nice, with people to look after you?" I stared at him, my fork halfway to my mouth. "A nursing home?" Before I could respond, Amy jumped in, her words rushing out like she'd rehearsed them. "It's not that we don't love you, Mama. It's just, you need care. This place is too big, and we're worried about you living alone. Alone. I wanted to laugh. I wasn't alone. They were living in my house, eating my food, sleeping in my bedroom, but I didn't laugh. I set my fork down, my hand steady, despite the storm inside me. And what happens to the house if I leave? I asked, my voice calm but sharp. Ryan didn't miss a beat. Well, we'd take care of it. Of course, it'd be in good hands. You wouldn't have to worry about a thing. I looked at Amy, searching for a trace of the girl who used to cling to me during thunderstorms, but her eyes were fixed on her plate, avoiding mine. That's when I knew. They didn't just want me out. They wanted my house, my life, everything I'd built. And they thought they could bully me into giving it up. I took a deep breath, feeling a fire ignite inside me. Ryan, I said, my voice steady as stone, this house is mine. I bought it. I paid for it. Every brick, every shingle, every blade of grass in that garden, and it will stay mine until I decide otherwise. Ryan's smile faltered, just for a second, but I saw the flash of anger in his eyes. Amy finally looked up, her face tight with something like guilt, but she didn't speak. Mama, she said after a long pause, we're just trying to help. You can't keep living like this. Like what? I wanted to ask. Like a woman who'd earned her place in the world. Like a mother who'd given her daughter everything. That night, I lay awake in the tiny guest room they'd banished me to, staring at the ceiling. I thought about all the years I'd spent raising Amy, the nights I stayed up helping her with homework, the sacrifices I made to keep her safe and happy. Where had I gone wrong? When had my little girl turned into someone who could call me a burden? But as the hours ticked by, my hurt turned into something else resolved. I wasn't going to let them take my home. I wasn't going to let them define me. I was done being invisible. The next morning, I called my lawyer, a kind man named Thomas who'd helped me with my investments for years. I told him everything: Ryan's scheming, Amy's betrayal, the appraisal Ryan had secretly arranged. Thomas listened quietly, then said, Lottie, you don't have to do this alone. Let's make a plan. Over the next few days, I worked in secret. I updated my will, ensuring my assets were protected. I met with my financial advisor, who confirmed what I already knew. My investments could buy me a life most people only dreamed of. And then I found it a penthouse apartment in a sleek building by the Savannah waterfront, with views of the river that stretched all the way to the horizon. It was everything my old house wasn't: modern, luxurious, mine. I didn't tell Amy or Ryan. I packed my things quietly: my books, my paintings, a few carnation bulbs I'd salvaged from the garden. The day I left, I called a taxi and loaded my suitcases into the trunk. Amy and Ryan were in the living room, watching TV, oblivious. I stood in the doorway, keys in my hand, and looked at them one last time. I'm leaving, I said, my voice steady. Amy's head snapped up, her eyes wide. Mama, what? Where are you going? Ryan leaned forward, his brow furrowed, like he thought I was bluffing. To a place where I'm wanted, I said simply. I set the keys on the hall table. You can stay here for now, but the house is mine. Don't forget to pay the utility bills. I turned and walked out, the taxi waiting in the driveway. As I slid into the back seat, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: freedom. I didn't look back, not once. Leaving my house on River Street felt like shedding a heavy coat I'd been wearing for years. It wasn't just the walls or the garden I left behind. It was the weight of being someone's burden, someone's problem. For the first time in a long time, I was free. I moved into a penthouse apartment by the Savannah waterfront. A place so beautiful it took my breath away. Floor-to-ceiling windows, sunlight dancing on the river below, a kitchen that gleamed like something out of a magazine. It was mine, paid for with the money I'd carefully saved and invested over decades. No one knew about that money: not Amy, not Ryan, not even my closest neighbors. And in that moment, standing in my new home, I realized I didn't have to hide anymore. I could finally be me. The first few days were quiet, almost too quiet. I'd wake up to the sound of the river lapping against the shore, make myself a cup of coffee, and just sit by the window, watching the world go by. No one told me to turn down my music. No one sighed when I left a dish in the sink. No one made me feel like I was in the way. It was liberating, but it was also lonely at first. I'd spent so many years being Mama or Mrs. Bennett, the teacher, that I'd almost forgotten who Lottie was, so I decided to find her again. I started small. I hung my old watercolor paintings on the walls, the ones Ryan had banished to the garage. I bought a new record player and filled the apartment with the jazz. I loved Ella Fitzgerald's voice floating through the air like a warm hug. And then, one sunny morning, I did something I'd always dreamed of but never dared. I walked into the Savannah Yacht Club, a place I'd driven past 100 times, always thinking it was for other people, richer people, younger people. But I wasn't that poor, retired teacher they thought I was. I had the means, and more importantly, I had the courage. I signed up for a membership, my hands trembling with excitement as I filled out the forms. The woman at the desk, a kind soul named Margaret, smiled and said, "Welcome to the club, Mrs. Bennett. You're going to love it here." She was right. The yacht club was like stepping into a new world. I met people who didn't see me as an old lady to be pitied, but as Lottie, someone with stories, passions, a spark. There was Beatrice, or B, a widow with a laugh that could light up a room, and a love for painting that matched my own. And Walt, to his friends, a retired sea captain with a twinkle in his eye, and a story for every occasion. They welcomed me like I belonged, and for the first time in years, I felt like I did. We'd spend afternoons, sipping iced tea on the club's veranda, talking about art, travel, life. B convinced me to pick up my paintbrushes again, and Walt taught me the basics of sailing, his gravelly voice guiding me through knots and sails with endless patience. That was Walt who first suggested I buy a yacht. "Lottie," he said one day, leaning back in his chair with a grin, "you've got the spirit for it. Why not get yourself a little boat? Something to take out on the water, feel the wind in your hair." I laughed at first, thinking it was a crazy idea, a yacht, at 68, but the more I thought about it, the more it felt right. I'd spent my whole life being practical, saving for a future I wasn't sure I'd live to see. Why not live now? So I called my financial advisor, Thomas, who'd been with me through every property deal and stock purchase. "A yacht, Lottie?" he asked, a hint of surprise in his voice. "Are you sure?" I could hear the smile in his reply when I said, "Absolutely. I want something that says, I'm alive." I was browsing yacht catalogs, dreaming of sleek lines and open water, when the moment I'd been waiting for arrived. The Savannah Yacht Club was hosting a charity auction, a glitzy event with string lights, live music, and the kind of crowd that wore linen suits and sipped champagne. I'd decided to bid on a small yacht, a 30-foot beauty with tick decks and a nameplate that read, Sea Star. It wasn't just a boat. It was a symbol of everything I was reclaiming. I dressed for the occasion in a flowing navy dress, my silver hair swept back, a pearl necklace I'd bought myself for my 60th birthday glinting at my throat. I felt like a new woman, not the one Amy and Ryan had tried to erase. The auction was in full swing, the room buzzing with excitement, when I saw them, Amy and Ryan, standing near the bar, chatting with a man in a suit, probably one of Ryan's real estate clients. They hadn't noticed me yet, and for a moment, I considered slipping away. But something inside me, that same fire that had carried me out of my house, said no. I wasn't hiding anymore. I raised my paddle when the auctioneer called out the Sea Star, 50,000, I said, my voice clear and steady. Heads turned, whispers rippling through the crowd. Ryan's eyes locked onto me first, his jaw dropping like he'd seen a ghost. Amy followed his gaze, her champagne glass frozen halfway to her lips. "Mama," she mouthed, her face a mix of shock and disbelief. I kept bidding, my heart pounding but my hand steady. 60,000, I called, outbidding a man in a seersucker suit. The auctioneer's voice boomed, the numbers climbing higher, but I didn't flinch. I wanted that yacht, and I could afford it. When the gavel came down at $85,000, the room erupted in applause. "Sold to Mrs. Charlotte Bennett," the auctioneer announced. I stood up smiling, as B squeezed my hand and Walt let out a whoop from the back. I could feel Amy and Ryan staring, their faces pale, their perfect world unraveling. Ryan was the first to approach, his salesman's smile plastered on but shaky. "Lottie, what's going on?" "A yacht. How can you?" He stopped, glancing at Amy, who looked like she might cry. "Mama, how could you afford this?" she asked, her voice trembling. I looked at them both, my daughter and the man who'd tried to steal my home, and I felt a calm I hadn't known I possessed. "I've been investing for 30 years, Amy," I said, my voice steady. "Real estate, stocks, a little patience. I'm not the broke old woman you thought I was, and this," I gestured to the auction, the yacht, the crowd. "This is my life now, not yours." Amy's eyes filled with tears, and for a moment, I thought she might apologize, might mean it. Mama, we didn't know, she stammered. We thought you needed help, Ryan cut in, his voice sharp. If you had this kind of money, why didn't you tell us? We could have worked together, fixed up the house, done something big. I almost laughed. Even now, he was thinking about what he could gain. I shook my head, my smile fading. This isn't about you, Ryan. It never was. And Amy, if you thought I needed help, you could have asked me. Instead, you decided I was a burden. I turned to the auctioneer, who was waiting with the paperwork. Excuse me, I said. I have a yacht to sign for. I walked away, their stunned silence following me. For the first time in years, I felt like Lottie again, a mother to be pitied, not a widow to be pushed aside, but a woman with dreams, with fire, with a life to live. And I wasn't done yet. After that night at the yacht club, something shifted inside me. It wasn't just about the yacht, or the stunned looks on Amy and Ryan's faces, though I'd be lying if I said that didn't feel good. It was about, finally, stepping into the life I'd been too afraid to claim. For years, I'd been Lottie the mother, Lottie the teacher, Lottie the quiet widow who kept her head down and her secrets close. But now, at 68, I was just Lottie, free, alive, and ready to live for myself. My penthouse apartment, with its river views and jazz-filled evenings, was just the beginning. I was building a life that sparkled, and no one could take that away from me. The weeks after the auction were like a dream I didn't want to wake up from. I started painting again, not just dabbling but really diving in, letting the brushstrokes capture the way the Savannah River glowed at sunset or the way Bee's laugh lines crinkled when she told a story. Beatrice Lawson, my new friend from the yacht club, was a godsend. A widow like me, with a passion for art and a wicked sense of humor. She'd drag me to gallery openings or convince me to try new things, like a wine and paint night where we both ended up with more paint on our clothes than the canvas. And then there was Walter Hughes, the retired sea captain who'd taken it upon himself to teach me how to sail my new yacht. The Sea Star. You've got the heart of a sailor, Lottie, he'd say, chuckling as I fumbled with the ropes. Just don't run us aground. Those afternoons on the water, with the wind in my hair and the horizon stretching out before me, felt like freedom in its purest form. I sold the house on River Street a month later. It wasn't an easy decision. Those walls held 30 years of memories. From Amy's first steps to the quiet nights I spent rebuilding my life after my husband left. But it wasn't home anymore, not after everything. I sold it to a young couple with a little boy who reminded me of Amy at that age, all wide eyes and endless questions. The money went into my accounts, adding to the fortune I'd built through years of careful investments. I didn't need that house to feel secure anymore. I had myself. Amy reached out a few weeks after the yacht club auction. She called, her voice hesitant, and asked to meet for coffee. I agreed, mostly out of curiosity. We sat at a little cafe by the waterfront, the air thick with the scent of salt and coffee beans. She looked different, smaller, somehow, like the weight of her choices was pressing down on her. Mama, she said, staring at her cup, I'm sorry I didn't know. About the money, about everything. We thought you were struggling, that you needed us to take care of things. I sipped my coffee, letting her words hang in the air. I wanted to believe her, to see the little girl who used to draw me pictures and beg for one more bedtime story. But then she said it, the thing that broke the spell. If you'd told us about your investments, we could have helped you manage them. We could have been a family, worked together. There it was, the same greed I'd seen in Ryan's eyes, dressed up in softer words. I set my cup down, my heart heavy but clear. Amy, I said, my voice steady, I'm your mother, not your bank. You didn't want to help me. You wanted my house, my life, because you thought I was nothing without it. Her eyes widened, tears welling up, but I kept going. I love you, and I always will, but I'm done letting you define me. I'm living for myself now, and you need to do the same. She didn't argue, didn't push back. She just nodded, and we finished our coffee in silence. It wasn't the reconciliation I'd once dreamed of, but it was honest. And that was enough. Ryan stayed out of the picture after that. I heard through a neighbor that he was furious, ranting about how I'd deceived them, as if I owed him my life's work. I didn't care. I was too busy living. I started hosting dinner parties at my penthouse, filling the table with Bea, Walt, and new friends from the yacht club. We'd laugh over plates of shrimp and grits, swapping stories until the stars came out. I joined a local art group, and When they asked me to display my paintings at a community exhibit, I said yes without hesitation. My canvases, bright swirls of river blues and sunset oranges, sold out on opening night. For the first time, I wasn't just painting for myself, I was sharing my world, and people loved it. I'm planning a trip to Key West with B next month, just the two of us on the Sea Star, sailing down the coast with nothing but the open water and our dreams. Walt promised to give me a crash course in navigation before we go, though he teases that he'll be on speed dial in case we get lost. I can already picture it, me at the helm, the sun warm on my face, the sea stretching out like a promise. At 68, I'm not slowing down, I'm just getting started. Looking back, I don't hate Amy or Ryan, I feel sorry for them, in a way. They thought money and a house would make them happy, but they missed the real treasure: family, love, living true to yourself. I could have told them about my wealth years ago, but I didn't because I wanted them to love me for me, not for what I had. Maybe that was my mistake, but it's one I've made peace with. I've learned that you can't control how others see you, but you can control how you see yourself. And I see a woman who's stronger than she ever knew, who's built a life out of courage and quiet determination, who's not afraid to shine. A lesson learned: if there's one thing I want you to take from my story, it's this: your worth isn't defined by what others think of you, not even the people you love most. Life doesn't end at 60 or 70 or any age. It's never too late to reclaim your dreams, to stand up for yourself, to live boldly. Don't let anyone put you in a box because of your age or what they think you lack. You are enough, just as you are. And if you're lucky enough to find yourself at a crossroads, like I was, choose the path that leads to you. For me, that path led to a yacht, a sunset, and a life that feels like mine again. What will yours be?